Hello, Radiant One, and a very big and a very warm welcome to Mastery, the show and podcast for brilliant spiritual beings just like you, having a human experience ready to ignite the mastery inherent in you, as well as grow and expand from within and wanting to lead with love in work, business, and life. Designed to activate the mastery already within you, here we merge the worlds of seen and unseen, magic and miracles with the mundane and the practical, spirituality with strategy, the energetic with the physical, and business, work, and life with a whole lot of love and soul. I'm your host, spiritual business coach, business developer, and radical love rebel Maria Serafina. And it is my deep honor, my great pleasure, and joy to share this episode with you. I serve business owners and leaders wanting to learn and be supported as you navigate leading with heart and soul. I do that through the Spiritual Leadership Academy, the Spiritual MBA, and one-on-one spiritual business coaching full of intuition and energetic alignment. You can find out more about everything on my website, mariaserafina.com. Having been called to this show and podcast, it is my strong guess that mastery is already inherent within you, Radiant One. If you'd like to expand and amplify that mastery, download the Mastery Activation I've created for you. Originally released within my paid membership, The Elevation, I've now made it available to all. Go to mariaserafina.com/MA or click the link in the description to receive it. Remember, if you enjoy Mastery, make sure you subscribe, like, comment, share, or leave a review to amplify the energy and love being shared in these transmissions so they can reach more and more gorgeous radiant beings like you. Today I'm joined by Julie Parker, founder of the Beautiful You Coaching Academy, co-founder of Priestess Temple School, and a mentor, counselor, coach, supervisor, and guide for sacred leaders and space holders. She has trained thousands of life coaches from around the world to birth their soul businesses and has had a thriving counseling and coaching practice for nearly 2 decades. Julie has inspired thousands of people as an in-demand speaker for clients, is the recipient of numerous leadership and women's awards, is an international award-winning published author, and host of the top-ranking Priestess podcast, where she has interviewed some of the world's great spiritual thought leaders. As a devoted and practicing priestess, Julie is committed to contributing to a world where presence, healing, and social justice are honored. This is the 3rd time I am blessed to have a sacred conversation with Julie, and as you'll hear, when I was called to add this new segment called My Last Bleed to Mastery, Julie was among the first names popping into my head and my heart. I am so grateful that she said yes. Here is our sacred conversation. Julie Parker, here we are again. Thank you for saying yes to coming on to this new rendition of my podcasting, journey. Would you start out by introducing yourself, would you start out by introducing yourself, who you are, and what you do, the light you bring into the world? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria, for having me on as a guest again. I'm always so delighted to be in your company. I am the founder of the Beautiful You Coaching Academy, where we train heart-centered people from all over the world to become life coaches. And I am also a guide and mentor to sacred leaders, speaker, podcast host, and author.
Yes. Like all the expressions of your glorious radiant soul. I love it. So thank you for sharing. You were one of the first people that I thought of, because this is actually a new segment of Mastery. And I've sort of dubbed it My Last Bleed. I don't know if that's actually going to be the name. But you were one of the first people who popped into my head when I thought of this. And you were also the first to say yes. So it was like just ding, 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 confirmation all the way. So this is going to be a segment or an episode or episodes about the spiritual journey through, I suppose, perimenopause, menopause, and into the transition into wise woman. So would you start us off by sharing, I suppose, your last bleed, what you remember, or if you were aware that it was your last bleed, what happened before and what came after? That's a big question. So we'll just sit at fire and listen. I'm gonna
Yes,
get
it is.
tea and then I'm gonna
It
listen.
is a big question. It is indeed. Well, my last bleed was 10 months ago. And so this, from a technical, physical perspective,
Mm,
places me still in the rite of passage that is perimenopause
yes.
rather than menopause.
Mm,
There are some people that say for you to be in menopause, you had to have had your last bleed 12 months ago.
yes. Yes.
And some people I have heard say it's 13. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
it's some it's somewhere around the 12, 13 mark.
Yes.
Now, my last bleed, as I just said, was 10 months ago. And interestingly, I got to the 11th month before then when I bled again. So I thought I was about to tip into menopause. And then right at the last minute, I had another period. And
Oh,
so, yeah, so that, which came as quite a shock to me
yeah.
because I honestly thought that I'd bled for the last time. When I got to that 11th month, I was like, this is it. And then not far into that 11th month, I bled again. And so it's now 10 months since that bleed.
Oh,
And so who knows what may
you don't even
happen. So,
know.
but I don't know. And that is part of the spiritual surrender of this journey. And so I don't know whether I'm still in perimenopause and in 2 months' time, I could be in menopause,
Yeah.
but I may still be here in perimenopause if I bleed again. And then everything resets. So I'm not sure at this point in time, but it's definitely the liminal space of the in between.
Oh, okay, so wow, already you're blowing my mind because that's like I didn't know that that was or a possibility. So when did you start to consider this might have been my last bleed?
Mm. Well, I had definitely noticed for the previous 2 years prior to the last time I bled that my cycle had changed
Mm,
significantly.
yeah. So you were tracking your cycle.
Yes, I was not someone who tracked my cycle when I was younger,
No.
but I also, Maria, I've been very blessed when I think about some other menstruators that I know throughout
Yes.
my life in regards to my cycle. Yes, I've had some period pain before, some
Mm,
heavy bleeding, things like that, but on the whole,
mm,
my cycle it wasn't like clockwork, but it was relatively
yeah.
regular. It
Yeah.
was relatively the same. It
Yeah.
was relatively usual and normal.
Yeah.
And so I did start to notice, along with a lot of other physical, emotional, psychological things that shifted and changed at
Yeah.
that time, that it was becoming less regular,
Mm,
that I would skip a month. And actually, at one point in time, even though I was in my late 40s, like
yeah.
I actually wondered at one point in time whether I was pregnant.
Oh.
Um, because I
Oh.
just didn't skip cycles. It was not something that, and then I was like, no, 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 you're not. It's like
Yeah.
this is what's happening. And then other things began to fall into
Yeah.
place. And then I would bleed again regularly for 3 months, and then I might have 2 months of no bleeds.
Mm,
And then I'd bleed for 4 months, and then it'd be three
mm,
months of no bleeds. And
mm,
so I knew definitely then I was in perimenopause. Things
mm,
were shifting and changing.
mm,
And what happened was that the length of time between bleeds got longer and longer.
mm,
I have a sense, just an intuitive knowing that I think I have bled for the last time.
mm.
I don't think I will again, but then again, I got surprised last time around. And so
And
I'm
you
not sure.
mentioned being in the liminal space, and you mentioned sort of also being in a state of surrender. Um, Spiritually, what has this experience been like for you? Like considering, am I pregnant? No, I'm actually, perimenopausal, or like, what has that brought up for you?
Yeah. Well, do you know what, Maria? You are about to get it, all of it, the full ugly truth,
Yes,
because
give it.
I really believe that nobody had ever spoken to me about this before,
No.
this rite of passage. My mother had not spoken to me about it
Mm.
before. All I'd known is that she and her sister and my grandmother spoke about it in somewhat hushed tones as the change of life.
Yeah.
Um, and nobody I'd ever known that was close to me had ever been through it.
Mm.
Uh, and I found initially when it began to happen for me, this change, this into perimenopause, and it's been going on for years now. I'm 52 now, and I think it started for me when I was probably about 46, 47.
Mm.
Uh, and the first signs I now know that it happened for me was that I was experiencing increased heat and temperature at night. And
Okay.
I started to feel hotter at
Yeah.
night, that I wasn't having night sweats, but I noticed that that was changing for me, and I wanted to have the window open all the time at night to make sure there was fresh air circulating in the room. But essentially, to start out answering your question, is it there have been parts of this journey that have been awful,
Yeah.
like really filled with spiritual angst,
Yeah.
anxiety,
Yeah.
uh, brain fog,
Yeah.
uncertainty about who I am,
Mm.
what's going on,
Mm.
changes in my body, like
Mm.
noticing, little chin hairs.
Yes.
Um, you know, uh, Not to mention the fact that that increased body temperature at night started out being, oh, I'm a little bit warm,
Yeah.
to now
Yeah.
being something that I've had to seek medical assistance for,
Yeah.
and it being, I am on fire.
Okay.
Like, what is going on? Like, full on night sweats. And I'm still very, very much there,
Yeah.
and needing to take things to assist me with that.
Yeah.
So that's a very, you might want to dive in and ask some more
Yeah.
specific things from that. But
Yes.
broadly,
Yes.
it has been challenging, let's say that. But one of the most beautiful things that has come out about it, especially since I started talking about it more publicly
Yeah.
online,
Yeah.
is a lot of other women have stepped forward and said, oh my gosh,
Yes.
this is happening to me too. I didn't even realize or know this is what it was.
Yes.
I thought I was literally going mad.
Yes.
And there is now, even in the last 6 years since it first started for
Yeah.
me, so much more talk about it now, which I'm so happy for, because none of us should go through this alone.
No.
I know for some people they breeze through,
Yeah. Oh,
and that has not been my experience at all.
no. And the I recognize a lot of what you're saying. I'm wondering if I don't know, the fire. Like, I'm not. I do. I've always had windows open. So, but we'll see if that's actually part of it. But I'm wondering if the fire from a spiritual perspective, if that is supposed to be, is it burning stuff down, or is it just a physical experience? I don't know.
Well, this is a really great question, isn't it? Because I'm sure that if you were to ask a lot of people
Hmm.
who were going through perimenopause, they would say, oh, it's just a physical symptom.
Yeah.
What happens is that when we no longer produce as much estrogen,
Yeah.
which is the thing that significantly drops for us hormonally
Yeah.
when we're going through this particular
Yeah.
experience,
Yeah.
that what happens is that it can cause night sweats and it can cause fluctuations in temperature, along with a variety of other things.
Yeah.
But when you are women such as we are,
Yeah.
then you are always, in many ways, searching for the spiritual and deeper meaning behind what it is that you may be going through. And one of the great teachers of my life, and someone, if you don't know Maria, I cannot encourage you to strongly look her up enough, is a woman by the name of Jane Hardwick Collins.
Okay.
I can send you details
Yes,
about her
please
if
do.
you like.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
Jane is a world-renowned expert within the realm of spiritual menstruation and rites of passage.
Ooh,
And so she could be somebody that is extraordinary for you to
yeah.
interview.
Absolutely. Yes.
Jane 100% believes that our birth is spiritual,
Yes.
our menarche is spiritual,
Yeah.
pregnancy, if that's an experience that we have, is a spiritual one,
Yeah.
birth, and perimenopause into menopause is also that as well.
Yeah.
And I think there are many deeper spiritual ways that we can think about this, with it being the autumn of the cycle of our life. We're no longer a spring young maiden.
No.
We are past our birthing years.
Yeah.
Once we're in, we're not that, but we're also not a crone.
No.
We're not, we're not a wise elder. We
No.
are in the stage of life from a spiritual perspective that some people call the maga, the
Mm,
magician,
mm,
the queen, the sovereign,
mm,
that
mm.
midlife where you give far less F's about everybody. You're stronger. You are,
Yeah.
this is often the time of
Yeah.
life where women are at their most powerful in their careers,
Yes.
in their 50s and things like this is when we see prime ministers, presidents,
Yes.
female leaders beginning to
Yes.
step forth. And so when you think about it like that, and then you equate it with fire, like the rising of body temperature, you start to go, oh, hang on a second here.
Mm.
Like there is a connection here.
Yeah.
And I think it could be either of those things,
Mm.
depending upon how it could be the burning away of so many things that
Yes.
you no longer have time for. Because once you reach this age, I don't think I'm going to live to 104. I might. I don't have any desire to, but
Mm.
it's highly likely that more than half my life is over. I have
Mm.
got no more time to waste,
No.
right?
Right.
I don't, all of those things. The other thing that the fire could be is
Yeah.
literally that fire energy
Yes.
of I'm here, I'm a midlife woman, I'm strong, hear me
Yes.
roar,
Yeah.
all of those
Yes.
sorts of things. I'm not the silly maiden caught up in comparison and all sorts of things that I
No.
once was. My children are now grown. My stepdaughter, she's now 26. She's almost 27 years old. She's a grown woman herself. She still needs me as her stepmother in many ways, but it's very different to parenting her when she was 7 or 17.
Yes.
It's a completely different
Yes.
experience. And so, yes, I do think that there are spiritual elements to things here.
I like the fact, and when I'm laughing, it's simply because like what you actually brought something up that I was thinking about that I was going to bring into our conversation is the whole notion of like I no longer give any F's about what other people think of me. And I've been wondering whether that had to do with the work that I have done, because I have done a lot of, deep personal work, as well as whether it's also simply a result of, like you say, I don't have time for that. Like there's things
Yeah.
doing on this earth before I take off. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think it could be both.
yeah,
I think
yeah,
there is an element of
yeah,
both. And I think it's I don't think we ever fully give up caring what others think of us.
Yeah,
Like I adore you and your work. I care about what you think of me, and
yeah,
I know
yeah,
you care
yeah,
about what I think of you too.
100%. Yes,
But for other people, like the strangers on the internet kind of
yes,
thing, it's
yes.
just like, no, I got no time for that.
No, no. People were just hating for hating, and people were miserable for like that. Like, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
And the yes, so and I love also that you share the both and, because that's one of the things for me, at least in my spiritual journey for the past, I don't know, at least 5 years or more, has been about, I see more and more it's not either or, it's both and. There's like
Mm.
we live in this world where things are supposed to be black and white and yes or no, but I've the deeper I go into my spirituality, the more I find, the oneness of everything, and so it's not either or, it's both and. So I love that you brought that up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, what was it like for you when you then had that bleed where you thought, okay, I'm done. I am now, like, because it must have been like, what?
Yeah, it was. It was like,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
I was so shocked because
yeah,
I really thought
yes,
I was done. I
yes,
was so close to being at that, it was the last month
yes.
before I would have officially
Claim the
been
title.
in, yeah, it's like menopause. I have graduated from perimenopause to menopause,
Yeah,
and that, you know, here I am. And so it honestly, it was I was in shock.
yeah,
And I was so certain that I wasn't bleeding again, that I had no period underwear. I had no tampons. I had nothing. I literally had to go and sort myself out because I had nothing.
yeah,
And I went, wow, okay, this has really taken you by surprise, Julie.
yeah,
And it did. I genuinely thought it was my last. It wasn't.
yeah.
And as you've heard me say, I do kind of feel as if now the last one it is, but I still have other things here just in case.
So this is
But
advice to everyone listening. Don't throw out, wait those 12, 13 months.
no,
So,
that's exactly right. Wait, because you could be one
yeah,
of those people that bleeds at months 9, 10, 11, and
yeah,
then it resets
yeah,
all over again.
yeah, yeah,
So I am close to no longer needing them,
yeah,
but it still might happen.
yeah. You mentioned the 13-month, which I find to be interesting because, the 13-month is very relating to the quote unquote feminine, uh, uh, or at least has been attributed to feminine aspects, in terms of there's 13 bleeds in a year. There's
Mhm.
Friday the 13th was considered Goddess Day because of the number. It's very closely connected to that. So that would be, on a spiritual level, at least, it would make sense that it was actually 13 months for some reason. That would make sense. Um,
Yeah,
you
yeah, absolutely,
Go ahead.
absolutely. And that's why I think that for some people, they say 12
Mm,
months.
yeah,
But as you just said, depending upon the days of the month and all sorts of things, that means there can be 13 bleeds in 12 months. And that's why I think
yeah,
some people refer to it
yeah,
as 13,
yeah,
that you need to, or 13 months, because
yeah,
that's how others can see it.
yeah.
I think, yeah, so 12, 13, it's around about then. Yeah.
You mentioned getting help in terms of, the hot flashes, or the rising of the temperature. Would you talk a
Mm.
little bit about your journey with, I suppose, Western medicine, or if it's Western medicine, but, like, would you talk about your journey with that?
Yeah. So I'm really happy to talk about this because I think that this is one of the areas where there are still a lot of people that feel significant uncertainty and even shame
Yes.
about needing to seek medical assistance,
Yeah.
whether it be Western medicine, Eastern, natural medicine,
Yes.
whatever it may
Yes.
be, to support themselves through this period of
Yes.
time. And
Yes.
honestly, if I hadn't actually experienced it myself,
No.
I would never, ever have had an understanding of what was necessary for me.
Yeah.
And everyone's experience is, of course, different. It's
Yeah.
really important for me also to say that, of course, this is just my experience,
Yes.
and everyone's is different. And
Yes.
also important to say that it was not just the night sweats that I was experiencing at the time when I reached out to get assistance.
Mm.
There were a number of other physical and also psychological things that were happening for me
Mm.
that I knew from the research that I was doing was about perimenopause and the
Yeah.
transition I was going through,
Yeah.
and that I needed to seek help. And those things included experiencing significant anxiety for
Yeah.
the very first time in
Yeah.
my life. Now, we all experience anxiety from time to time,
Yeah.
but I went from being somebody that had never experienced it significantly before
Yeah.
to worrying about things like my husband driving down the street to get the groceries and fretting that he was going to have a car accident.
Okay.
Like it went from 0 to 100
Yeah.
very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Excessive brain fog.
Yeah.
Like I was having incredible difficulties focusing, concentrating. I
Mm.
would get tired very, very easily. This was also related to the fact that I was waking up 4 to 5 times an hour throughout the night
Ooh, okay.
with these night sweats
Yes.
and with the
Yeah.
increase in temperature. So the knock-on effect, Maria, for me around that was that over days, weeks, and months,
Yeah.
I was getting fitful sleep.
Yeah.
Terrible. And this, of course, made everything worse.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah. This is
finally
why
recognized
sleep
that,
sleep
yeah,
deprivation is on the list of torture. So yes.
yep,
Sorry, I cut you
yeah,
off. Go ahead.
that's okay. It was just all accumulating to the point where
Yeah.
I felt terrible. I
Yeah.
felt physically terrible,
Yeah.
emotionally terrible, psychologically messy.
Yeah.
And so I made an appointment to go and see a women's
When
health
did you realize
menopause.
that? When did you when
Oh,
what
this
clicked for you?
was what clicked was just there wasn't one particular thing. It
Mm.
was an accumulation of
Yeah.
I'm not sleeping properly, I'm incredibly anxious, but from a physical perspective, it was mostly about the heat at night. And I
Okay.
had a fan. By then, I had a fan, not
Yeah.
just the window open. I had a fan
Yeah.
that went all night. I still have that fan that
Yeah.
goes all night
Yeah.
right next to me, and it was making no difference. I was still waking up. And then other things were happening when I was waking up throughout the night as well.
Mm.
Sometimes I would wake up so significantly that my brain would send the message to my bladder, it's
Yeah.
time to get up. And I was needing to go to the toilet 3 or 4 times in the night
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because I wasn't sleeping deeply. And
Yeah.
so I went to see a women's health specialist, a
Yeah.
menopause specialist, and she said, okay, she said, you're deep in perimenopause.
Wow.
And I loved her approach because she was very holistic. She said, what we're going to try for a couple of months, but only a couple of months, because that should be the window that we know if there's going to be a positive shift here, you'll see it and you'll
Yeah.
know it.
Yeah.
Let's try the natural route to begin with.
Yeah.
Herbs, medicine, you know,
Yeah.
cotton pajamas, all of those sorts of things, sleeping naked, whatever you need to
Yeah.
do. And so there were certain herbs and supplements,
Yeah.
magnesium, vitamin D. There was a licorice root, very good for helping quell heat, all of those sorts of things. Didn't work. Didn't notice any shifts at all. And so when I went back to her, she said, okay, we need to talk about HRT.
Yes.
And I was not, like so many other people, had only ever heard about the horror stories about HRT.
Mm.
And she was absolutely fantastic. She said, "Oh gosh, okay." She said, "Let's do a little bit of psychoeducation here."
Yeah.
And the short version of the story was, she said, the first thing is, she said, that entire study where HRT has been linked to breast cancer, she said, has now been completely debunked.
Yes.
Completely. She said
Yes.
it is
Yes.
now known to have been an absolutely terrible research
Yes. Yes.
thing that
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
She said most of the women that were participants in that research were not in perimenopause. They were, in fact, years and years and years into menopause. Some of them were as old as being in their 70s.
Oh.
And she said none of their comorbidities were taken into account. She said, so there ended up being a lot of women in that
Yes.
study that had
Yes.
complex health issues relating to diabetes,
Yeah.
heart disease, varying different other things. She said that
Yeah.
then meant their precursors for breast cancer were off the charts.
Yes.
So she said it's been completely debunked. She said
Wonderful.
all HRT is replacing the estrogen in your body that you're losing.
Yeah.
She said it's completely natural.
Yeah.
There's nothing synthetic about it. She said you can either put it on your arm with a gel,
Yeah.
or she said you can wear a patch.
Yeah.
And I went, okay, we'll go. And so I took the patch. Within
Yeah.
48 hours, I felt like a different woman.
Yes.
It was extraordinary.
I've heard that from a friend who told me that. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Oh, unbelievable.
Yeah.
Now, I still am warm at night, but I'm no longer having the night sweats.
No.
I no longer wake up nearly as much as I used to. The
Yeah.
anxiety has completely calmed down.
Yeah.
It's still there at times, but I'm also seeing that as potentially a part of this spiritual rite of passage.
Yes.
I'm not who I was
No.
before, and I'm moving through that.
Yeah.
I no longer have the brain fog that I once used to.
Yeah.
Life is just significantly
Yeah.
better. And I am here to tell you that I have read some stories where, most unfortunately, some women and menstruators have not fully understood or realized what has been happening to them
Yes.
when they have been going through this experience, and they
Mm.
have literally felt suicidal
Yes.
because it's
Yes.
just been so utterly overwhelming, and they feel like the whole body is just on fire and just not coping with
Yes.
things well at all. And I can really understand that. I'm so
Yes.
glad that was not my experience, but it certainly wasn't easy. So for me,
Yeah.
HRT has been a goddess send. It
Yes.
really, really has.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. There's so many things to highlight about what you shared. Number one is that um, I want to emphasize that it is not spiritual to seek out Western medicine. Like
No.
I had a slip disc back in 2015, and I thought, I'm just gonna, I'm a spiritual person. I don't do like drugs. I don't do painkillers. I don't do it. But after 3 weeks of being unable to do anything, sit, stand, whatever, I had to surrender into it, and got on a prescription or a combination of drugs. I knew that the cause of the slip disc was spiritual, but I couldn't figure out the root cause until December 29th, 2015. My back clicked into place. I was doing something online. It had to do with finances. My back clicked into place. The next morning, I woke up painless or pain-free. And I was like, at first I didn't realize what it was. And that was my moment where I was like, had I not taken the medication or that combination of pills, I wouldn't have been able to get to the point where I was actually able to do stuff and do what I wanted to do for it to click into place to then, and I was out of the pills for like a week or two later. I'm not saying about it was just I'm sharing this because there's this notion that it's not spiritual to be seeking out, Western medicine, that we have to do it all naturally, like naturally.
Yeah. And of course, that's someone's choice if they
Yes,
choose. And
yes,
I
yes,
and if that were,
yes,
I wish that had worked for me.
Yes.
I really wish that it had. I mean, there's no you don't win a prize in life for
No.
not wearing a HRT patch, but I wish that that natural route had
Yeah.
worked for
Yeah.
me. It
Yeah.
didn't.
No.
And I was at the point where I was not beginning to function as a human being.
Yeah.
I could not do my work properly.
No.
I was just not
Yeah.
functioning.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so this for me became about quality of life.
Yes.
And the simple truth is that you can't have a rich spiritual existence if your physical, psychological, and emotional quality of life is so compromised
Yes.
that
Yes.
you can't you know, when you're not sleeping
No.
properly, you're not eating properly, you're not thinking
Yeah.
cognitively in a positive way, then your ability to be able to have a rich spiritual life and existence
Yeah.
takes a huge blow.
Yeah.
And so you're 100% right.
Yeah.
It's we all should do whatever it is that is best and right for us to bring us back to
Yeah.
wherever it is
Yeah.
that we can that's best for us.
And there's also, I can't remember where I saw this, like there's a whole shaming of women or people who menstruate perspective as well, like that we're supposed to be handling this on ourselves or on our own. And I saw somewhere that it said that estrogen is literally the only hormone that we're not replacing. Like, so if you have an issue with insulin, like that's like gives you diabetes, that's then taken care of, and all of like all other quote unquote hormonal, I don't even want to call them diseases or but issues are taken care of by then replacing or adding or adjusting these things, except for, and I can't
Mm.
help but think of like from a societal perspective in terms of women who've had to quote unquote suffer in silence for years. And also it hasn't been until we now have, female or people who identify as women, like the OBGYNs, they go through this that they start to think there's something like what is happening. And then they start to do the research because
Mm.
men just don't am I making any sense or
Yeah.
thoughts?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're making sense. And look, again, this is everyone's individual path.
Yes.
You know, it's like so many different things in life, isn't it? It's like people who choose to have a home birth or choose to birth without Western drugs,
Yeah.
to assist with pain. These are choices
Mm.
that everyone can make.
Yeah.
And we have to choose what is right and best for us. And I honor the path that anyone takes
Yes. I agree.
and also expect that people would honor that path for me too. But
Yes.
I remember having a very, very big, tearful conversation with my husband where, he was almost begging me as well,
Yeah.
get help.
Yes.
You are not the same
Yeah.
as you once were.
Yeah.
You have lost your vibrancy, your vitality. I
Yes.
can hear you thrashing around in bed at
Yeah.
night.
Yeah.
Your quality of life is just, it's plummeted, it's gone through the floor.
Yeah.
This is terrible. And
Yeah.
I just couldn't have it go on any longer because it was at the point where it was starting to impact my business.
Yes.
And you own your own business as well. And you know that if you
Yes.
can't work and you can't do your work, then that starts to impact your bottom line. And then you've got a whole other set of problems.
Yes.
And so for me, I took the course of action that I needed to be
Yes.
able to
Yes.
thrive. And
Yeah.
I'm so glad that I did.
Yeah. 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 Yes to everything you're sharing. One thing that keeps coming up for me is also because I remember the first time I saw a list of the quote unquote symptoms of perimenopause or menopause, and it was like a gazillion pages,
Uh-huh.
and it was like, what? And it's just to say that you don't necessarily have all of the things, you might have some of
No.
the things, or you might just have one thing. And I am like, I shared like this was also as much selfish. I'm doing these it's selfishly, there's two things for me. Like number one, I think selfishly I want to make sure that this gets out as far as wide as possible so that more people can start to realize there's nothing wrong with you. This is what's happening for you, like to you, like this, or for you, like what's happening with you is this. And number two, I think that there's an intuitive part of me that's preparing me for it as well in some way, shape, or form. And finally, there is over the past few days, funnily enough, as we were having this recording, I'm starting to realize more and more I am actually like deep in perimenopause, and with your sharing, I'm like, oh, my next call's got to be to an OBGYN or something that someone has to start. One thing I'm finding really that I love is that, so here in Denmark, not too long ago, there was we actually received a survey, women between I can't remember what ages, and they're actually going to start to survey us for the next 3 to 5, like for the next, I think, 20 to 30 years. This research is going to go on where they're going to ask us about how we feel, how we like everything. So there's actually massive research starting also in Denmark, which I love. So yeah.
That's great. That is great, because we
Yes.
need this more and more and more,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you're so right about those lists of symptoms.
Yeah.
There is about 20 to 30 of them, I think. It's a very long list.
Yeah.
And no, it's not usual for everybody to have them all. For example, I know that one of the things on the list is having very itchy and irritated skin.
Yeah.
That can be one of the
Yeah.
difficulties and challenges with perimenopause. I have never had that.
Me neither.
However, I know other women who have, and it's been really debilitating for them, like scratching, itching, just like feeling like they've got allergies of some sort. And so their experience of that was my experience with the night sweats. And so everyone is different, and this is what makes it so unique, and also I think really challenging for others to understand, because everyone's experience of it is so different.
Because one of the things that I've been considering is, when does it go from, because that's where I suppose my spirituality, I don't want to say that it's hindered, but when does it stop being a spiritual experience and being something where you're realizing, oh, this is like, there's actually something that, because I know, so I've seen some studies or research that shows like how women or people who menstruate have received, like, they get a drug for anxiety, they get a drug for depression, they get a drug for like whatever, frozen shoulder, they get a drug for all these things, and all of those could actually be quote unquote solved. And this is not medical advice, you need to seek out your own doctor, with estrogen. And for me, like, one of the things I'm realizing, the anxiety thing, like the suicidal ideations, I'm starting to notice these things, and I'm like, when does it stop? When do you stop making it a spiritual experience and being like, no, wait, there's actually something physical that I can do about this?
Yeah, look, I'm not really 100% sure of the answer to that question, because when this became really challenging for me, when the symptoms of perimenopause, the experience of perimenopause became very challenging, I probably would have been the last person in the world to have said, that would have wanted to have heard anybody say, oh, you're undergoing a spiritual experience. I probably would have turned around and shot them daggers, straight out my eyes.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the line here, is that when things reach a point where you are no longer well and functioning, like the symptoms or the physical or emotional or psychological things that you're experiencing have moved and shifted to a point where you're not functioning.
Yes.
You're actually starting to break down in some way, which is really what began to happen to me.
Yes.
And you're no longer feeling like you can cope.
Yes.
I think then that what's occurring then is that the physical symptoms have overtaken anything that might be empowering from a spiritual perspective. Now, that doesn't, now we all know about dark souls of the night and all of
Yes.
those sorts of things.
Yes.
But
Yes.
those sorts of experiences do not necessarily correlate with deeply impactful physical symptoms,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? That's a different thing
Yes.
altogether. So
And
I think
also this, go ahead.
no, I was going to say, so I just think that when those physical symptoms are so acute
Mm.
that you're no longer functioning, I think it's shifted into something else and likely something to seek
And I
support
want
for.
to emphasize, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're saying physical, you also mean psychological because
Yeah,
you
physical, psychological, emotional, whether
yes,
it's
yeah,
depression,
yeah, yeah,
anxiety,
yeah,
suicidal
yeah,
ideation,
yeah, yeah.
extreme itching of the skin,
Yeah,
dry eyes to the
yeah.
point where you can't see properly, aches and pains,
Wow.
uh, you know, just the night sweats, also night terrors.
Yeah,
They happen to anything like that that reaches a
yeah,
point where physically, emotionally, psychologically, you are beginning to not function
yes,
well.
yeah,
You are no longer thriving.
yeah,
And it's been strung together over likely a number of months.
yeah, yeah.
Like it's not just days or
No,
weeks, but it's happened over. Then I
yeah,
think
yeah,
it's very hard to see that as a completely spiritual experience when the physical, emotional, and psychological impact is such
yeah,
that you're just not thriving. And I think
yeah,
that's when I needed help,
yeah.
more help
Because
than what
then
I
it
was
it
getting.
actually ends up being spiritual bypassing. It ends up
Well,
like
it can be, yes.
you end up bypassing all of what's actually really going on for some sort of spiritual perceived enlightenment or whatever. Like, yeah, okay. Um, wow. So we have time is flying. Is there any last because we could go on and on and on. Is there anything that's you feel like that's been left unsaid or anything you want to share or any final words in terms of this? We should
Yeah, I
probably
think
have you on in about 2 years once we then
when I'm deep in menopause, yes.
if you are, yes.
Well, hopefully, if I am, because
Yeah, yeah.
you never know. I think if there was one thing that to share with everyone, and this is not something that I knew until I first began to experience this, is that first of all, people can begin to experience the onset of perimenopause as early as their early to mid 30s,
I was just going to highlight that. Yes, yes.
right? And
Yeah,
so for me, it didn't
yeah,
happen until my sort of midish 45,
yes,
46, as I said before, 40s.
yeah,
But it can happen that early. And so please, when you are still fertile and able to have babies and may have young children, things like that. So if you're starting to notice a lot of things beginning to happen to you and you're not certain, then seek help from your naturopath, from your doctor, from whichever
yeah,
medicine person,
yeah,
wellness person that you trust and love.
yeah.
And I also think it's important to know, which because I think it helps to really put this in perspective
Mm,
and assist everyone to not have unrealistic expectations around it.
mm,
Because, of course, when we start to experience things in our heart, mind, body that aren't necessarily that lovely and
mm,
don't feel that good, it's
mm,
very human that we want to change that as quickly as we can
mm,
and for it to stop as quickly as you can.
mm,
But the research tells us
mm,
that the stage of perimenopause,
mm,
going into menopause, and having some of the physical symptoms and psychological and emotional symptoms
mm.
that we've been talking about today lasts on average 13 years.
There's that 13.
13 years. Yeah, there you go. There's that 13 again, right? So
Mm.
this began for me around 46.
Mm.
I'm now 52.
Mm.
I'm not halfway there,
Mm.
potentially on average, as to
Mm.
how long
Mm.
I might realistically expect to
Mm.
continue to have to need to deal with
Mm.
the
Mm.
the heat,
Mm.
the
Mm.
psychological things,
Yeah.
etc. And so I just think that's an important, it can sound, you can go, oh no, Julie, that's terrible, but it's not meant to be. It's just meant to help everyone to understand that this rite of passage,
Yes.
this shift, this
Yes.
change in
Yes.
life is not a short one.
No.
It's actually one that can go on for a long time.
Yes. As are each of the phases of our lives. So that would make sense.
Correct. Yep. Puberty is not over and done with in
No.
6 months or a year.
No.
Puberty for some can start as young as 9
Yeah.
and go right through until, you know, 20,
Yeah.
21,
Yeah. Really try.
or at least 17,
Yeah.
18.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a stretch there that can be 8, 9, 10 years. And so this is really not
Yeah.
necessarily any different.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Again, my hope with this podcast is to inspire, empower, and uplift, so that we each go on our own journeys and explore. And yes, there are no quick fixes or overnight successes. Or, I mean, in terms of the HRT, you did mention that, and I like that we can, destigmatize that whole aspect of the journey as well, whether it be, holistic or not holistic, but whether it be natural medicine or Western medicine. It's your journey. And so yeah,
Mm.
thank you for being so willing to share so openly. And
It's a
because
pleasure.
it's my deep belief that when we do that, that is what inspires others, or plants a seed that all of a sudden they're like, oh, that something clicks, and they're like, huh, I wonder if, and then start to explore.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure, because I just think the more we talk about this, the more hopefully it will help people.
Yes,
Yeah.
because we're clearing the path for those who come after. Like
Yes.
this needs to be talked about.
Yeah.
Um, so I will leave the links to Julie and to the Beautiful You Coaching Academy, to the person that you mentioned. I'll get, like, there will be a link to my website, and then there will be all the links to where you can find Julie and her podcast and all her beautiful offerings as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Julie, and to everyone listening or watching, have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much.
That is what I have for you in today's episode of Mastery with Maria Serafina. I hope it served you well. For all the deeds and details, click the link in the description and help me spread the love of this transmission by sharing it with a friend or on social media, or leave me a comment or review. Have a wonderful day. God bless.